Welcome back to your Friday Buckeye Talk from cleveland.com. I'm super excited for this. I think we all are. This is going to be difficult and interesting, and I don't have a handle on it, and that makes for a good podcast. Doug Maurice, Nathan Baird, Stephen Means. We are doing a Ryan Day era offensive draft. We're going to do defense on a future podcast, but the goal here is to draft a full 11-man offense from players of the Ryan Day 4-year head coach era. 11 players. Quarterback, running back, tight end, 3 receivers, 2 tackles, 2 guards in the center. You can do 2 tight ends and 2 receivers if you want to. But the wrinkle is that everybody is allowed to draft, actually has to draft, 1 Urban Meyer player and 1 Jim Tressel player in this 11-man team. So everybody's team will wind up as 9 Day era players with 1 Meyer and 1 Tressel. And the reason we are doing that is because some of these positions don't actually have enough starters across the board in the Ryan Day era to like fill out everything. But there's going to be some great strategy here between need and trying to grab excellent players at certain spots. And Nathan, I personally have a list. I have groups. I don't have a strategy because I think maybe more than any other draft we've ever done, this really depends on what everybody else does and how it affects you, because those bonus picks, required bonus picks in the Meyer and Tressel era, the way they are used will have a great effect on everybody else's team at multiple positions, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Like I have rankings at each position. I have an overall ranking. I think those probably almost conflict with each other at some point, and the whole thing gets thrown off in certain categories depending on whether one of you takes somebody from those other eras at that position. I think this is going to be fun. I hope we come out of this with a sufficient just anger towards each other, just a sufficient.
Well, I have zero worries about whether that will happen or not. We just did a similar thing on the College Football Survivor Show. Shahan Jeharaja and I did a draft of the ultimate offenses of the college football playoff era. So we drafted 2 offenses in that from all 9 years of college football playoff era. And Stephen, there's a lot of things that came up there. Shahan had the first pick in that one and made an unusual pick that was based on scarcity, not necessarily the best player available. And I think, Stephen, that's going to work in here because there are some positions where it's like, well, is this guy the best player of the Ryan Day era? No. But he might be significantly better than the other options there, especially a guy might be significantly better than what the 5th and 6th options might be at a certain position. And I think that'll factor in.
I think that'll be interesting when it comes down to having to pick your Urban Meyer and your Jim Tressel guy, especially because there's the guys that probably everybody can name off at the top of their head. But if those guys start coming off the board and now it's like, well, now I have to take a guard from the Tressel era. And I don't know if I want to do that. You know, it kind of works both ways where you remember the skill positions a little bit easier from 20 years ago than you do maybe the in the trenches guys. So I am interested in how that kind of plays itself out as well.
So we will have the texters vote on this then, who built the best team. So the goal here is to build a team that you would then take into a season and try to win. So it's not a parking lot game. It's this is a team we are trying to win a national championship with in a college football season. And you get the best version of this player at Ohio State. So we discussed this. Don't think about Joe Burrow at LSU. Don't think about Jamison Williams at Alabama. Those do not factor in here. It's what you did as a Buckeye. But for instance, if you take, J.K. Dobbins, you get the 2019 best you ever saw version of J.K. Dobbins. You don't get the 2018 sharing time with Mike Weber, J.K. Dobbins. You get the best of everybody they ever were, and nobody can be picked twice. So there are some players here who played multiple positions. If they get drafted at one position, they're off the board at the other position because there's only one of those people existing in the world, and that's how we're going to do it. We are going to do a modified snake draft. We did this before the pod. Nathan is going to have the first pick. I'm going to have the second pick. Stephen third. Stephen then will also pick 4th. I'll pick 5th. Nathan will pick 6th. And then after that, we'll just go in order. So it'll be Nathan 7, me 8, Stephen 9, Nathan 10, me 11, Stephen 12. And we'll go all the way through until we make 33 picks, 11 players on each offensive team. the idea, I guess, right? I mean, we want Texters to vote for our teams. That's not the main goal here. But so, I mean, skill guys are going to matter, but also skill guys matter to winning on the football field too. So I have no idea. I honestly have no idea who the number one pick is going to be. And so I know I have not decided who my number one pick is going to be because it's going to depend a little bit on who Nathan makes the overall number one pick, because scarcity in some positions is going to become a factor very quickly. We're treading water here a little bit. We usually like to dive in. We want you guys to think about this. I think you could do this with your friends. Like, I don't know. Do people sit around and do that? It's like, hey, you guys want to come over and do a day era draft? One Tressel bonus, one Meyer bonus. Like, yeah, no, I'll come over. Want to get some nachos? Yeah, let's do that. I don't know. I think this is going to be fun. So think in your head what you might do before we start to do it. And then at the end of this, you can evaluate whether we did a good job or not. Nathan Baird, we're starting the clock to you with the number one pick in the Ryan Day era offensive draft.
So I'm actually making this decision on the fly because as I came into this, I was thinking, for some reason, I hadn't really thought of what I would do number one overall very much. I was thinking more about crafty things to do later. And so this is one of those things where I think there's a strategic move to make here based on that Urban Meyer, Jim Tressel wrinkle. And I'm probably outthinking myself. But when I look down my rankings, I think that combination, I think there's a pick to make here. So I'm going to take Troy Smith.
Oh, wow. Okay. I don't think that's a bad pick. Now, one of the things here, Stephen, is that one of the reasons that I said we should do this wrinkle is because Ryan Day's only had two starting quarterbacks. So when you say, hey, we're doing a day era draft, it's like, all right, well, one of us gets Justin, one of us gets CJ, and then somebody else gets like the Kyle McCord start. And it's like, okay, well, that guy's going to lose. So you've got to do something to open this up. And then once you open it up to JT Barrett, you open it up to Braxton Miller, you open it up to Terrell Pryor, and you open it up to Ohio State's last Heisman Trophy winner. For that reason, this is a good pick, but it also is somewhat limiting because now your Tressel pick is off the board. Stephen, what do you think of Troy Smith going number one here?
I wouldn't have done it just because of that exact reason. For start, I don't know if this is the position I would have used the Tressel Urban Meyer pick because Troy Smith is very good, but so are Ryan Day's two starting quarterbacks. But also, you can do the idea of what if Terrell Pryor had been developed in this day and age as a quarterback under Ryan Day? Because I think that's what we're doing this under is they're playing in today's offense of Ohio State, which is taking them out of the Urban Meyer, Jim Tressel era. I get it from a talent, accolades, what he's achieved standpoint. He's a number one pick caliber person, but this is where maybe strategy and how you maybe want to use that pick comes into play. So I don't have a problem with it from a talent standpoint. Troy Smith is Troy Smith.
And just to be clear, my thought process here is it was the one position where I was genuinely excited about the Tressel option.
Fair point.
That's not necessarily true at any other position, or there is so much depth at that position that if I don't get a Tressel pick at those other positions, I was kind of okay with it. So I wanted to get the most bang for my buck out of my Tressel pick.
I have a slight edge here, right, as the only person who actually covered anything in the Tressel era. So there is one Tressel guy hanging out there for me at a particular position that I think might be my go-to there. It would not have scared me off Troy Smith, though, and I thought a lot about Troy Smith. I think this is a very interesting place to go. It does make it a little easier on Stephen and me because now we know that Stephen, you and I are going to split Fields and Stroud one way or the other. So I like this, and I will say there is a pick like this. There is a pick like this that I am considering right now at number 2. And I'm considering it very, 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 very hard. But I don't know if I'm going to do it because now that I gave it away, I feel like I should do it. I think I am going to do it. I'll take Ezekiel Elliott.
I almost took him number 1.
Yeah.
Because I think here's the issue. J.K. Dobbins is a really good running back. One of you guys is going to be very happy with J.K. Dobbins, right? I think I think people are a little down just on Trayvon Henderson right now. They're thinking more about what he did as a sophomore and not how good he was as a freshman. And Zeke is magic. Troy is magic. It's like we could do that draft. Draft magical Ohio State players, right? Well, like how many truly magical Ohio State players are there when you phrase it that way? I can think of a couple more in this draft. I can. But they're not all over the place. You don't have one every single year. But I do think you guys are both kind of agreeing with this pick. If you're thinking about voters, if you're thinking about the way people view Ezekiel Elliott and the peak of him, it's magic. Is it not, Nathan? You're nodding your head. Like the warm feelings that people have when they think of Zeke, those will never go away.
There's an X factor to this discussion, to all these discussions we ever have on this podcast when we're talking about history and people's placements in it. There's this X factor. It's a vibe. It's a feeling, however you want to say it. And Ezekiel Elliott captured that even with similar production to some of the other guys that we have to pick from. There was an essence to an aura around watching him play and looking back on what he did that separates. Like there's other really, Dobbins is, I think, the great example. You can look at the production that J.K. Dobbins did, fantastic. Like you said, I think Stephen or I will take him and be pretty happy with where that plugs in production-wise. But there was something special about what Ezekiel Elliott did, and especially, I think you give bonus points when somebody puts a team on their back and carries them to a national championship.
So let me ask a question, Stephen. If we're doing a Ryan Day era draft, and it's only been 4 years, Urban had 7, Tressel had 10, is it a bad thing that the first 2 picks are non-Ryan Day players, or is this just like, it's time? There's just, one guy won a Heisman, one guy was the key to a national championship. This is how this works? Or is it like, hey, Day era, let's go. Let's get some more magical dudes?
For starters, you taking Ezekiel Elliott here very much changes the way I have to think about this, because now I had some things in my mind and you threw them off. No, I don't think so. I just think that Urban Meyer had a special guy of that caliber so early, who had a magical moment. This is like year 3 of the Urban Meyer era, and he had that, and he finished the job. Troy Smith didn't finish the job from a national championship standpoint, but he finished the job in terms of hardware. We've had guys in the Ryan Day era who were probably of that caliber, but because they don't finish the job, you don't view them the same way.
Yeah, no, I think, okay, I feel good about making this pick then. I feel good about it. So, Stephen, now you said you had to adjust your thinking here. You have picks 3 and 4. Where are you going?
Yeah, I'm getting my Tressel pick out of the way now because I can't afford to just let him be on either one of you guys' roster. I'm taking Teddy again, Jr. That's as special as special gets. We were talking about college football, and there is not an era of college football you don't drop that type of speed in, and he's not special.
That's 3. That's 3. Ryan, what are you doing? What are we doing here? This is super interesting. Go ahead, Nathan.
Well, I was just going to say, the counter argument is that there's been so much good talent in the 4 days of the Ryan Day era that there's depth there. You don't feel scarcity at positions. I understand this pick. I don't know if I would have taken Ginn here, but I understand when I drew this up, because listen, we're looking at it through the modern lens. We're looking at this through the 2023 lens. And I know that you covered the Tressel era, so you have a unique perspective on how special those guys were in the moment. But when we look at them through the modern lens and all in the recruiting ramp up that happened from when Urban Meyer got here and has taken Ohio State kind of to another level, then the Tressel talent doesn't really show up on my lists that much. That was why I wanted to grab Troy Smith first, because I don't care. There was like no other Tressel player that I was that excited to get.
Yeah, I know. So, for instance, one guy who is now not going to be picked that we know for sure is Maurice Clarett, because you guys both made Tressel picks and I picked my running back. That would be another guy. Like, we're talking about magic, right? Little sprinkled magic, especially in the minds of Ohio State fans. Clarett's not going to be in this draft. He would belong in that category. Again, there's a couple guys, but it's not as many, because like for a shorthand, what I did, I went through, Beanie Wells is another guy that's not going to wind up in this draft. I had both of them on my list as possibilities here, depending how things would shake out. what I did is I just double checked everybody who started in the Ryan Day era, and then I went through and looked at the all Big Ten players from the Meyer and Tressel eras. And that was my shorthand of like, yeah, that's like if you're not an all Big Ten player and you're only getting, one guy from each era in this draft, you're probably not going to make it. And to your point, Nathan, like offensively, there's not a million in the 10 years of the Tressel era. They're not all. There are years. There are years where you go through and it's like, man, there's a lot of Wisconsin guys in the all Big Ten team. Man, there's a lot of Iowa guys on the all Big Ten team. Why aren't there more Buckeyes? And it was this era of special teams and defense and maybe a special guy here or there, like Troy Smith, like Ted Ginn, like Beanie Wells, like Terrell Pryor, but it wasn't like a constant flow like maybe you see in the Ryan Day era with the offensive skill position. So I find this to be this is interesting to me, Stephen, because you are so, I don't know what the word would be, aware of, locked into the receiver position in the Ryan Day era, and then you still decided to go with Ted Ginn Jr., I think as a tip of the cap to Teddy. So good for Teddy.
Yeah, I think an element of it is, there's an element to us trying to build a roster here, and nobody has that type of speed to put it at Z position that nobody can match that. And like I said, Ted, you drop him in any era, he's Ted Ginn Jr. Even in today's receiver room, they're really good receivers. They're NFL level receivers, but that doesn't mean they're guys where no matter what era you drop them into, they're going to be what they are right now. Well, you can say that about Ted.
Okay. Fourth pick to you, Stephen. Where are you going now?
Once again, the board was thrown off. A part of me wants to get my Urban Meyer pick out of the way right now. But at the same time, like Nathan said, there is such a talent jump that maybe you can wait on it a little bit. And I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to wait a little bit on that one. And I'm going to take J.K. Dobbins. I think of what's available to take left on the board for what I can do, since I can't take a Tressel guy anymore because they're gone, that takes the Maurice Clarett and Beanie Wells out of the equation. The next logical choice at running back here is J.K. Dobbins. And then I do think he has 2,000 yards in a season. Regardless of what he did in 2018, he more than made up for that in 2019 when he was the engine of that team. And as much as we want to talk about penalties and, targeting calls and an interception at the end of the game as part of why they lost to Clemson, J.K. Dobbins was running all through Clemson's defense, and then he messed his ankle up, and that took away that most important part of that Ohio State offense that year was its running game. And so when you have a 2,000-yard back and you've already lost a dude who was magical because of that run he had at the end of 2014, you got to take the next best guy, and that's J.K. Dobbins.
Puts the squeeze on Baird a little bit. Now you can wait, Nathan, but also you're going to have a decision to make on where you're going to go there, and there's probably going to be a little drop there. So that's a good pick. I like we're thinking about tiers and scarcity and that kind of thing. I think J.K. Dobbins is a good pick here at number 4, and as the first player off the board from the actual Ryan Day era in the Ryan Day era draft. Okay. I don't know exactly what I want to do. I know theoretically how I want to approach it. I'm between a couple guys, but I think I'll let my recency bias guide me a little bit here, and I'll take Paris Johnson. Mm-hmm. So there are just some positions here where we don't have enough guys. So I think tackle is one of them, Nathan. I'm glad when I hear Steven grunt. That's a good thing for my pick. That makes me feel good about it. Nathan, what do you think of Paris Johnson here?
That was very likely going to be my pick. I felt the same way you did. Although it depends on how, there isn't as much first round talent at this position, but there's definitely NFL talent at this position that has come out of the Ryan Day era. And that's being proven out right now actively and is about to be proven out again in April. But Paris Johnson Jr. is one of those, being a All-American on multiple lists. Not a lot of guys that you can on this whole thing that you're necessarily describing that way. So I like this pick.
This is where you messed me up.
Was he on your board, Stephen, for when it came back to you?
He was going to be 3 or 4 until you took Ezekiel Elliott and Troy Smith as the first 2 picks, and it made me have to rethink some things here. But there's still some depth. I think there's still some first-round depth. taking Paris now makes me have to think about how I use other picks going forward. But I agree. I think he deserves to be this high in terms of this is a 5-star kid who's a very big deal when Ryan Day held on to him. And even though, yeah, there's some versatility here. You put him at guard if you want to, because he did play guard for a year here. Well, actually 2 years, because he was a backup guard at the end of that 2020 season, and he even played some snaps in that Clemson game. But so there's versatility, there's that, but also more importantly, he was really good when he finally got to play the position he was recruited to play here. He had given up 1 sack in his career ever before that Michigan game.
Yeah, if I put him at guard, I've done something wrong. Something has gone terribly awry. So my plan is put him at tackle, but to your point, yes, I do have some flexibility there.
Yeah.
Something has gone terribly awry. Buckeye Talk / the Greg Studrawa story. That's pretty good. Okay. Pick 6, Nathan Baird, we're to you.
Decision, because I don't think I'm going to take – I think I can just save running back till the end, and I think I know who I'm almost basically locked into there. I do still have the Urban Meyer pick that I can use, but I want to – I was probably going to take Paris. Dang it. And now strategy comes into it. But I think I'm just going to keep it simple and let the guy who we thought maybe belonged already on the receivers, Buck Moore, and the guy that I think will definitely be there a year from now. So with this next snake, and we can talk about it at the same time, since they're both receivers, I'm going to take Marvin Harrison Jr. and Chris Olave.
That's a great pairing.
So I was very curious to see how this Day era receivers would shake out, because there's like a top level, right? There's a clear top level with these guys. But and officially Marvin Harrison Jr., you're picking ahead of Chris Olave. Yeah, I thought Marvin Harrison Jr. I was pretty sure it would be the first receiver off the board from the Day era. But I think maybe you could make arguments. I don't know. Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson were just the 2 best rookie receivers in the NFL and did amazing things. And maybe, not that it changes the lens, but it's like, hey, maybe if they both weren't here together, maybe if they didn't have Jackson Smith and Jigba in their final year as another option, maybe those guys would have gone nuts too. But I do think Marvin is the right guy. And again, Steven, you're grunting. Would you think this is a good pairing? You said that. Is Marvin, in your mind, Steven, definitely the top Day era receiver in a draft like this?
100% the best receiver. I mean, just physically. No one else is built like him and can do some of the stuff he does. And I think the reason why I said great pairing is Marvin Harrison is everything you want in an X receiver in this offense. Chris Olave is everything you want in a Z receiver in this offense. Smooth route runner who just takes tops off defenses and gets in the end zone. And that's what they want from the Z. And then, everybody in the world will want Marvin as their X. They're going to be NFL scouts salivating over him from the moment I would assume he's catching balls from CJ at Pro Day, just like we saw in years past with underclassmen getting to participate at Ohio State. I like this pairing a lot.
Okay. So now we are heading back to me, and I have a decision here because there's the guy I kind of want to take based on football and scarcity, and then there's the guy who's got some juice and would make my heart swell with joy. So what do I want to do? Do I want to make my heart swell with joy? Do I want to make my heart swell with joy? And maybe make Steven sad?
Don't do that.
Do I want to do that? Do I want to do that? And maybe make a point? Yeah, I'll do it. I'll take Garrett Wilson. And
y'all
here's
hate me
why.
Today.
In the end, as much as we talked about Garrett Wilson on this podcast, was he underrated at Ohio State? Was he underrated as somebody who, in his final year, was surrounded by 2 other first-round talents at receiver? And you saw what Marvin Harrison Jr. did this year. They're completely different styles of receiver. But I talked for 3 months about how I wanted the Browns to draft Garrett Wilson before they made the trade for Deshaun Watson. I thought Garrett would be great in the NFL. We all thought Garrett would be great in the NFL. And then Garrett's great in the NFL. And I think he's just scratching the surface. What if Garrett Wilson is on like the Justin Jefferson path? And then I think we would say, well, he didn't have 1,900 receiving yards in the season at Ohio State. I'm preparing myself, Nathan, for actually Garrett Wilson is even better than we ever realized, even though we talked about how great he was all the time. Do you know what I'm saying, Nathan? I think we might be agreeing here.
Yeah, and listen, Marvin Harrison Jr. is the only guy available from their pretty stacked receiver core that was a unanimous All-American. And like it had been a long time in Ohio State history since that had happened. And that says something, but it also kind of says that he didn't have two other first-round receivers in his offense at the same time. I think that if you were to take Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson and drop them into other years of Ohio State history where they got to be the number one option by themselves instead of like 1A, 1B, 1C as they were in 21, then I think that maybe they could have had a season like that stood out a little bit more statistically. Because in terms of performance, not production, but performance, what they were was unquestioned. They just happened to do it together at the same time.
Is he your slot or your ex? Which makes the point.
I don't know. I have to figure. Yeah, it depends on who else I take.
Because we talk about, we call it the Garrett Wilson plan whenever we ask Emeka and Jackson and Brandon Innes one day. We call it the Garrett Wilson plan. You start outside, you go inside, which some of that might have just been because the depth was just lacking after KJ Hill left, and you probably didn't want to start a true freshman. But if 2020 is normal, he has an 1,000-yard season in the slot, and then he actually had a 1,000-yard season as an ex. While also having some time as punt returner where, it was boom or bust, but he had some great punt returns. They were using him in the run game on some of those jet sweeps where he was explosive there. He is the genesis of the wide receiver renaissance here. And he has been it since he committed. He was it as a player, and now he's doing it in the NFL. Garrett, I'm sorry. You're supposed to be on Team Stephen, but it is what it is.
Okay, so let's make this pick at 9, Stephen, and then we'll take a break. And I'm super curious to see what you do here. I think I know what you're going to do, but I'm curious. Go ahead.
I have to take Jackson Smith-Njigba here, right? I have to.
I think you do.
I have you guys, as the receiver room is great, but there is a bit of a drop-off. And I think Emeka might be creeping because he did have a quiet 1,000-yard year this past season. It just maybe didn't look as explosive all the time. So maybe he's a caliber guy here. But just for right now, I think it's those four, a little drop-off, then Emeka. And then there's there's a lot of questions there. And you can't leave that on the board for either one of you guys to take with wide receiver spots still available. So I don't really have a choice. I've got to take the guy who had more catches and more yards in a single season than anybody else in Ohio State history, and the only reason he didn't follow it up is because of a hamstring. Shay, woe is me.
Yeah, this top four, Nathan, right? These top four day era receivers are cut above.
I wanted to get two of these guys somehow, so that's why I just jumped at the first two to get the first two. There are positions where the day era is a little more scarce relative to those other two, and you only get to pick one from each of those, so that gets tricky. But here, there's a wealth of talent from the day era, and I wanted to get two of those four because these are the best receivers in school history, right? Program history. Like Steven said, they're the Renaissance. I think that's a good way to look at it. And I know that they were used differently in the past, and if the argument I was making about dropping those guys into the past, maybe that doesn't hold up because they wouldn't have been thrown to as much. And you could say, here's a guy from the Tressel era or the Meyer era that if you put them under Ryan Day, how many thousands of yards would they have had? Fair. Totally fair. But we have to go somewhat on what our eyes are showing us and what black and white is showing us. And these guys have been unquestionably great.
All right. That's our first 3 rounds. We have 8 rounds left. We'll take a break here on Buckeye Talk. We'll come back with the first pick in round 4 after this.